The morning my son showed up with a moving truck, I was drinking coffee on the back porch watching the Cardinals fight over the feeder. I didn't hear the truck at first. What I heard was my daughter-in-law's voice carrying across the yard, sharp and certain, the way it always was, when she'd already decided something. She was on the phone, walking the perimeter of my property, like she was measuring it. I set down my mug. My name is Lawrence Beaumont. I'm 67 years old, and for the past 32 years, I worked as a senior fraud examiner for the IRS Criminal Investigation Division out of Phoenix, Arizona. I've sat across tables from people who embezzled millions and still looked you in the eye without blinking. I retired 3 years ago thinking I'd finally seen the worst of human nature. I had not. My son Colt is 34. His wife is Renata. Wait, I need to use different names. Let me start again the way it actually happened. The way I'd tell it to someone sitting across from me at a kitchen table. My son's name is Colt, 34 years old. His wife is Simone. They'd been married 6 years, and for most of those 6 years, I'd watched Colt slowly become someone I didn't recognize. Not all at once. That's never how it happens. It was gradual, the way a good table starts to warp when moisture gets into the wood. You don't notice until one day you set a glass down, and it slides right off the edge. Simone was a real estate agent in Scottsdale. Ambitious, which isn't a bad thing, but the kind of ambitious that measures every room in your house the moment she walks in, not because she admires it, because she's calculating what it's worth. I live at 44112 Desert Willow Court in Chandler, Arizona. The house has been mine for 28 years. I bought it for $187,000 when this neighborhood was still being built, put a new roof on it in 2019, updated the kitchen in 2021 with money I'd saved specifically for that purpose. The Zillow estimate when all this started was $640,000. I know because I checked it myself, just curious, after seeing where homes on my street were selling for. I am not a rich man. I am a careful man. Those are different things, and the difference matters. My wife, Patricia, she passed 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer, 18 months from diagnosis to the end. When she died, something shifted in my relationship with Colt. He'd always been closer to her. After the funeral, the calls got shorter, the visits less frequent, and I told myself that was grief, that everyone processes it differently. I gave him room. That was the first mistake. The second mistake came about 8 months ago, when Colt started calling again. Not the obligatory Sunday check-ins we'd gotten down to. Actual calls, sometimes twice a week. He wanted to know how I was doing. He asked about my health, my routines, whether I was still playing poker on Thursday nights with the guys from my old office. I was so relieved to have my son back that I didn't ask why he'd returned. Simone started coming to the house with him. She'd walk through the rooms commenting on things, not critically, just observationally. This kitchen remodel turned out beautiful, Lawrence. That backyard would be perfect for entertaining. Little remarks I filed away without meaning to. Then the paperwork started. Colt would bring forms he said were routine, estate planning updates he called them, beneficiary designations, a healthcare proxy form, some tax documentation related to my retirement accounts. I'd been meticulous about my estate planning. I had a will, a trust, a durable power of attorney already in place. But Colt explained that things had changed with tax law, that my CPA had flagged some issues, that it was just housekeeping. Here's the thing about fraud examiners. We spend careers catching people who assumed their victims weren't paying attention. And then we retire and become exactly the kind of victim we spent 30 years warning other people about. Because Colt was my son. And you don't examine your son's paperwork the same way you examine a stranger's. I skimmed. I signed where he pointed. I trusted him. 3 forms over 4 months. I remember each visit clearly now, though I didn't put them together at the time. January. Healthcare proxy. March. An estate trust amendment. April. Something about vehicle titles and personal property transfer. April was the last one. In early May, I got a call from my bank. A woman named Sylvia from their fraud department, calm and professional in the way bank employees are trained to be when delivering bad news. "Mr. Beaumont," she said, We're flagging some unusual activity on your accounts. We wanted to verify some recent transactions before processing them." "What transactions?" I asked. "A wire transfer," she said. "Initiated yesterday. $180,000 from your money market account to a third-party LLC." I set my coffee mug down very carefully. "I didn't initiate that transfer, Sylvia." There was a brief pause. "Mr. Beaumont, the transfer was authorized using a financial power of attorney submitted to our wire department. The document names a Colton Beaumont as your authorized agent." I stood there in my kitchen for a long moment, looking at the cardinals sitting on my back fence like none of this was happening. Then I asked Sylvia to freeze every account she had access to and told her not to process anything further until she heard from me directly with a verbal confirmation code we'd set up together on the call. She agreed. She was good at her job. After I hung up, I went to my filing cabinet, the heavy steel one in my home office that I've had since 1997, and pulled the folder labeled Legal/Tate. Inside was a copy of the original durable power of attorney I'd drafted with my attorney 11 years ago. It named Patricia as my primary agent. After she passed, I'd had it amended to name my brother as successor, not Colt. I pulled out the document Colt had given me in March, the one I'd signed with barely a glance because he'd covered most of the page with his hand, pointing to the signature line and saying, "Just here, Dad. It's the same thing you already have in place. Just updated language. I read it this time. Every word. It took me 4 minutes." It was a new power of attorney, naming Colton Beaumont as my sole authorized financial agent with immediate, unconditional authority over all accounts, investments, and real property. I sat down at my desk, and for a while, I just sat there. 32 years of examining fraud documents, thousands of cases. I testified in federal court more times than I could count. I'd helped people in prison for doing to strangers what my son had just tried to do to me. I took a breath. Then I picked up the phone and called my attorney. His name is Stuart Macon. We'd worked together for 15 years, first professionally when I'd refer cases that needed civil litigation, then personally after Patricia got sick and I needed someone I trusted to help get my affairs in order. Stuart picked up on the second ring, which is one of the reasons I've kept him on retainer. I walked him through everything in 10 minutes, the same way I used to brief supervisors. No editorial, just timeline, documents, amounts, names. When I finished, Stuart was quiet for a moment. "Lawrence," he said, "do you have the signed document in front of you?" "Yes." "Don't let it out of your sight. Don't confront Colt yet. Come to my office tomorrow morning and bring everything you have, original POA, the new one, bank statements, anything Colt gave you to sign over the past 6 months. I'll be there at 8. "Good. And Lawrence, I'm sorry. I know this isn't easy." It wasn't easy. But easy and necessary are different things, too. I didn't sleep much that night. I spent most of it at my desk, going through documents the way I used to go through audit files, methodically, without emotion, looking for the shape of the thing. Because fraud always has a shape. You learn to see the outline of it before you can see the details. What I found was this. The $180,000 wire transfer had been to an LLC called Sonoran Property Holdings. I looked it up. Registered in Arizona 4 months ago. The registered agent was Simone. There was a second wire transfer pending, $95,000 from a different account that Sylvia's Freeze had caught in time. Total attempted theft, $275,000. I also found something else. 3 months ago, Colt had filed a lien document against my property. It was buried in a stack of paperwork I'd signed in April, not the POA, a separate form he'd slipped in. The lien named Sonoran Property Holdings as creditor, claiming I owed $275,000 for consulting and property management services rendered. Services I'd never requested, from a company I hadn't known existed. It was elegant in a horrible way. If they'd succeeded, here's how it would have worked. The wire transfers drain my liquid assets. The property lien establishes a legal claim against the house. Then they either force a sale to satisfy the lien or use the POA to deed the property directly to the LLC. Either way, I end up with nothing, and on paper it looks like I authorized all of it. Except I hadn't, and I knew exactly where the seams were. Stuart confirmed it the next morning, spreading the documents across his conference table and going through them with the focus I'd always appreciated in him. He spotted 2 things I'd missed. The lien document had been signed with a notary stamp from a different county than where I lived, which was unusual, and the notary's license number didn't match the name printed beside it. Fraudulent notarization, he said simply, which makes the lien void, and combined with the POA. Lawrence, you understand what we're dealing with here. Elder financial abuse. Yes, I know the statute. Stewart nodded. Arizona Revised Statute Section 46, Criminal Exploitation of a Vulnerable Adult. It's a Class 2 felony. I'd explained that statute to witnesses on more occasions than I could remember. Sitting on the other side of it felt surreal. We need to report this to APS and the Maricopa County Sheriff before we do anything else, Stewart said. The moment we alert Colt, he'll start moving things. We need the criminal referral in place first. How long will that take? 24 to 48 hours for the initial report. Then it depends on how fast they move. Stewart looked at me. In the meantime, do you have a safe place to store your original documents? Not in that house? I do. I have a safety deposit box at a different bank than the one they tried to wire from. One that Colt doesn't know about. Good. Move everything critical tonight. I did. That evening, I drove to the branch on McClintock Drive and locked away the originals of every document I owned. Deed, will, trust, original POA, every tax return for the past 10 years, my retirement account statements. Everything. Then I drove home and made a list of every interaction I could remember with Colt and Simone over the past 8 months. Dates, what was said, what I signed, where they sat, what questions Simone asked about the house. I have an old habit from my IRS days. I keep a legal pad on my desk, and I write things down longhand. Dates, conversations, anything that might matter later. My former colleagues used to tease me about it. 32 years of yellow legal pads. That night, I filled 12 pages. Colt called the next morning, which told me Sylvia's freeze had triggered some kind of alert on their end. His voice was careful in the way it gets when he's managing a situation. Hey, Dad. Everything okay? I got some kind of notification about your accounts. I kept my voice even. Bank stuff. Fraud alert. They're looking into it. Oh, do you need help dealing with that? I've got it handled, Colt. I'll talk to you soon. I ended the call. My hands were steady. 48 hours later, a detective from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Financial Crimes Unit left me a voicemail. His name was Trejo. He wanted to meet at my home to review the documentation. Detective Trejo turned out to be younger than I expected. Mid-40s, compact, with the kind of precision in his speech that told me he'd testified in court a lot. He sat at my kitchen table and went through the documents with the same deliberateness I recognized from my own career. When he got to the notarization issue, he stopped. The license number's invalid, he said. I know. Stewart flagged it. Where was the notarization done? According to the stamp, Pinal County. But I'd never been to Pinal County, and the document was supposedly signed at my home address. Troudno made a note. Mr. Beaumont, I want to be direct with you. What you've described, the POA, the lien, the wire transfers, the fraudulent notarization, this is not impulsive. This was planned over several months, at minimum. Do you have any idea what their financial situation looks like? I'd looked into it. Simone had 3 active real estate listings and no pending sales. Colt had left his job at a logistics company in February. I'd known that. He told me he was exploring other opportunities. What I hadn't known was that they were 4 months behind on their mortgage, their second one, the investment property in Tempe they bought 18 months ago. Trejo took that information without reacting. They often don't. We'll need to subpoena the LLC's bank records, he said, and your son's financial records. That takes a court order, but given what you've provided, I don't anticipate problems getting one. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. Mr. Peeming, Beaumont, have you spoken to your son since the wire transfer attempt? Once. Briefly. I didn't tell him what I knew. Good. Let's keep it that way for now. I nodded. I understood the protocol. I'd given that same advice to witnesses for 3 decades. After he left, I stood in my living room and looked at the photographs on the mantel. Colt at his college graduation, grinning in his cap and gown. Colt and Patricia at the Grand Canyon, the summer she was first diagnosed, both of them squinting into the sun. Colt at his wedding, Simone beside him in her dress, and me in the center holding a glass of champagne I hadn't wanted to put down because I'd been afraid, standing there, that something was already off. I pushed that feeling away. That was the mistake that preceded all the other mistakes. 2 weeks passed. Stewart filed to invalidate the lien and revoke the fraudulent POA. The court granted a temporary restraining order preventing any transfer of my property while the case was under investigation. The $180,000 wire transfer was reversed by the bank after the fraud report was filed. The receiving LLC hadn't yet moved the funds, which told me they hadn't expected the freeze. The second transfer, the $95,000, never went through at all. I went about my life. Poker on Thursday nights, coffee with my brother on Sundays, the Cardinals at the Feeder. I'd started a new project in my garage. I restore old furniture, have done it for years, same way some men restore cars. I had a 1940s maple writing bureau I picked up at an estate sale in Mesa, water damaged and missing 2 drawer pulls. Working on it gave me somewhere to put my hands while my mind did what it needed to do. Colt called twice more. I kept the conversation short and ordinary. How's the weather? How's the knee? Have you been watching the Diamondbacks? He had no idea what was coming. The morning the sheriff's office executed the search warrant on their apartment, I was in my garage with the writing bureau. Trejo had called the night before to let me know what was happening. A courtesy, he said, given my cooperation. I sanded the same 12 inches of maple for about an hour until Trejo called again. We've got the devices, he said. Emails, text threads, financial records. Mr. Stein, Beaumont, there are communications between your son and a man named Philip Garrett. We're looking into him now, but he appears to offer financial consulting services with a specialty in what he calls family estate transfers. Your son paid him $12,000 over the past 4 months. Someone coached them. That's what it looks like. And there's something else. I found a text exchange between your son and your daughter-in-law from about 6 weeks ago. He read it to me. Colt, once the property transfers, we sell within 60 days. Quick listing. Below market if we have to. Simone, what about your dad? Colt, he's got his Social Security. I'll find him a place in Sun City. One of those assisted living places, they're fine. Simone, Colt, he's not even sick. Colt, he will be. He's 67. It's not cruel, it's practical. He gets care. We get a fresh start. I stood in my garage holding the phone for a moment. He's 67. It's not cruel. It's practical. I'd raised that boy, coached his little league team, drove him to every college visit, sat beside his mother in the hospital for 18 months and called him every single day so he'd never have to hear bad news alone. He gets care. We get a fresh start. I set the phone down and picked up the sandpaper. I worked until my arms ached, until the maple under my hand started showing what it was supposed to be. The hearing was in Maricopa County Superior Court, Courtroom 14B. Stewart had filed a civil action to void the fraudulent documents and recover damages. Parallel to that, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office had filed criminal charges, exploitation of a vulnerable adult, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Colts and Simone arrived with their attorney, a man named Whitfield, who had the kind of aggressive confidence that fills a room before he says a word. He made a point of shaking Stewart's hand too long, the way lawyers do when they're performing certainty they don't entirely feel. He approached me before the session started. Lawrence, may I call you Lawrence? I want you to understand that what happened here was a misunderstanding about document language. My clients were trying to help you plan your estate. There was some confusion about the scope of the authorization. Stewart stepped forward. You can speak to his counsel, Mr. Whitfield. Not to him directly. Whitfield smiled. Of course, my apologies. He walked back to his table. I watched Colt during that exchange. He was looking at his phone. He didn't look up. Judge Harmon was a woman in her late 50s with the efficient manner of someone who doesn't tolerate theater. She read both parties' filings before the session, and it showed when Whitfield stood to give his opening statement, she let him get through about 3 minutes before she interrupted. Counselor, the court has reviewed the forensic analysis of the power of attorney document. The notary license number on that document doesn't exist. Do your clients have an explanation for that? Whitfield shifted. Your Honor, we believe there was an administrative error on the part of the notary. The notary whose name is printed on the document was contacted by counsel for the plaintiff. She states she has never met either defendant and did notarize this document. The silence in the courtroom had weight. That was when Stewart stood and submitted what Trejo had provided, the text messages. All of them. The property transfer timeline. The Sun City comment. The communications with Philip Garrett. It went into the record like a stone into still water. Judge Harmon read the text exchange. She read it twice. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. I recognized it. It's the look of someone who has stopped giving anyone the benefit of the doubt. Whitfield tried. He argued that text messages lacked context, that Colt had been under financial stress, that the intent was never to harm his father. He used the word misunderstanding 4 more times. He called me elderly once, which I noted. Stewart's response was 12 minutes long and required no raised voice. He laid out the timeline, 8 months of documented visits, the sequence of documents, the LLC formed 4 months before the wire transfer attempt, the $12,000 paid to Philip Garrett, the fraudulent notarization, the lien filed against a property that was notarization, the lien filed against a property that was not encumbered in any legitimate way. He ended by saying, the defendants didn't make a mistake, they made a plan. Judge Harmon voided the fraudulent power of attorney. She voided the lien. She issued a permanent injunction preventing either defendant from initiating any transaction involving my assets or property. She referred the full case file to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office with a written recommendation for prosecution on all counts. When they stood to leave, I looked at Colt for the first time that morning. Really looked at him. He'd lost weight. His suit was the same one he wore to his mother's funeral, and it was too big for him now on the shoulders. He looked like someone who'd been running a long time and finally stopped. He looked at me once. Just once, and quickly. I didn't look away. Whitfield was already on his phone in the hallway. The performance was over, and he had other clients. Outside, Stewart and I stood in the parking lot in the Chandler sun, which in June is not the kind of sun you stand in comfortably for long. The criminal case will take time, Stewart said. I know. I've worked federal fraud cases that took 3 years to reach sentencing. How are you doing, Lawrence? Not with the case. With all of it. I thought about the right answer for a moment. I'm fine, I said. And then, because Stewart had known me long enough, I'm not fine. But I will be. He nodded. That was enough. Sentencing came 7 months later, after Colt took a plea agreement to avoid trial. The prosecutors had built a case tight enough that Whitfield advised him not to fight it. Simone didn't take a plea. She went to trial and lost. Colt received 3 years probation, $275,000 in restitution, and a permanent prohibition from serving as any person's financial agent or trustee. He also had to complete 400 hours of community service at a senior services organization, which I will admit was the detail that satisfied me most. Simone received 18 months in custody, followed by 2 years probation, and surrendered her real estate license. Philip Garrett, the consultant who coached them, was charged separately by the Arizona Attorney General's office. He lost his business license and is currently facing federal charges related to other clients he'd advised in similar schemes. It turned out Colt wasn't his only student. I sat in the courtroom for the sentencing the way I used to sit in courtrooms for sentencings the way I used to sit in courtrooms for sentencings in cases I'd helped build. Still, watching. When they led Simone out, she didn't look at me. When Colt received his sentence, he stood very straight in the way people do when they're trying to hold themselves together in public. The judge asked if he had anything to say. He said, "I'm sorry, Dad. I don't know if he meant it. I don't know if it matters. Sorry is a word. What I know is what the documents showed, what the text showed, what 32 years of reading people showed me about his wife when I watched her walk my property line that first morning. I accepted it without expression. I've learned that expression in courtrooms over a long career. It's not coldness. It's just the face you wear when you need to be present without being destroyed." 3 weeks after sentencing, a letter arrived. Colt's handwriting on the envelope. I recognized it. He has his mother's slant, a little left-leaning. I set it on my desk for 2 days before I opened it. It was 4 pages, handwritten. He'd written about the debt, the fear, Simone's pressure, how it had escalated so gradually that he'd told himself it wasn't what it was. For a long time, he wrote about his mother. He wrote that he understood now that I would never have let him fail if he'd just asked, that asking felt impossible, and he didn't know why. That he was in therapy now, which he'd never done before. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked if, someday, we might be able to talk. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer where I keep things I'm not done with yet. Maybe someday, not today. But maybe. I finished the Maple Writing Bureau 2 months ago. It took longer than I expected. The water damage went deeper than it looked, into the joints, and I had to disassemble the whole piece and re-glue it from the inside before I could worry about the surface. That's the part people don't see in restoration work. The invisible repairs are the ones that hold everything else together. It sits in my office now. I use it every morning. Good piece of work, whoever built it in 1943. They made things to last. I still play poker on Thursdays. I still have coffee with my brother on Sundays. The Cardinals are back at the feeder. They never actually left. I just stopped paying attention for a while. I'm 67 years old. I spent 32 years helping the government catch people who believed they were too smart to get caught. I retired thinking the hard part was over. I was wrong about that. But I wasn't wrong about the things that mattered. That evidence doesn't lie. That patience beats panic. That the truth has a shape, if you're willing to look at it long enough. My house is still mine. That's enough. I've been thinking about what I'd say if someone asked me what this whole thing was really about. Not the legal part, the human part, and I keep coming back to the same answer. It was about what happens when someone decides that patience and trust are the same thing as weakness. Colt watched me for 8 months before he made his move. He watched me sign documents without reading them. He watched me smile when he called, relieved to have him back in my life, not asking why he'd returned after years of distance. He saw a 67-year-old man living alone in a house worth more than most people's retirement accounts. And he made a calculation. He decided the math was in his favor. What he didn't calculate was that I'd spent 32 years doing exactly what he was trying to do to me. Following the money, reading the documents, finding the seams in the story where the truth leaks through. He looked at my age and saw vulnerability. He didn't look at what I'd actually done with my life. That's the thing about underestimating people. You see what you expect to see. Colt expected a grieving old man who missed his son and would sign anything put in front of him. He wasn't entirely wrong about the grieving. He wasn't entirely wrong about missing him. But he was completely wrong about what I'd do once I understood what was happening. There's a kind of clarity that comes when someone you love betrays you. It's not the hot clarity of anger that comes later, in waves, usually at night. It's a cold clarity, almost clinical. The same clarity I used to feel sitting across from a subject in an interview room when I knew the documents in my briefcase told a different story than the one coming out of their mouth. Your emotions don't disappear. They just step aside long enough for you to do what needs doing. I don't believe people are born with good judgment. I think you build it slowly from every decision you make and every consequence you absorb. Colt made a series of decisions over 8 months, each one a little worse than the last, each one made easier by the fact that the previous one had gone unpunished. That's how it almost always works. Not a single terrible choice, a long chain of small ones, each link forged from the belief that no one is paying attention. Someone was paying attention. What I want people to understand, if there's anything useful to take from what happened to me, is that your intelligence doesn't protect you from being deceived by people you love. Love creates blind spots. That's not weakness, that's just what love does. The protection isn't cynicism. It isn't refusing to trust anyone. It's knowing the difference between trust you've verified and trust you've assumed, and never letting the two feel the same. I trusted Colt because he was my son. That was real. What wasn't real was the assumption that his love for me was still operating the same way mine was for him. I assumed without checking. He counted on that assumption. And for a while, he was right. The Maple Writing Bureau sits in my office now, solid and restored, doing exactly what it was built to do. Some things hold up. Some things don't. The work is in figuring out which is which, and having the patience to do the repair right when it matters. I'm still doing that work,